right. Well, good morning on this January 15th. 6, the number of lovers in the tarot.
I didn't know that.
The lovers, yeah. The masculine and the feminine coming together in divine union. How is your divine union and how are you this morning?
Both are pretty good. The connection I feel with Shara Ann is, I feel it deepening. Not necessarily, like before I described that I was communicating where I would get some messages, and I haven't had a lot of clear communications like that, but the felt sense of her presence and the feeling of having a greater union with her, with some of the divine bliss yesterday in particular. I feel a lot closer to her, and because of that I feel well.
Right, that's wonderful. I don't know how you managed to get in divine bliss, because I know when I saw you briefly during our work day, it was a very demanding work day. We were filming other people who shared this value system of supporting our planet and humanity with reverence, and lots of long dialogues and meetings. So tell me a little bit more about how that was for you. When did that happen, or how did that happen? What was that like? And just a heads up that I'm so glad that it is shifting. One of the things I'm going to teach about this week is sort of our maturation as consciousness beyond looking for messages and things like that, actually how that can work against our growth and our welfare to need direction or messages in this way. So not that I'm saying, because remember, in the new heaven and the new earth, it's not one or the other. So I'm not saying, to kibosh any incoming messages, but to start to practice in this way is new for you. So tell me about it.
Yeah, I just kind of all day, it wasn't like I was enjoying everything that was happening, and I was grateful for, being in the higher vibrations throughout the day. But I really kind of wanted to be with my twin. And so though I was really tired at the end of the day, I just really was focusing on being with her, being in her presence, and working with the breath, and really the volcano too, working with the volcano. Mm-hmm. And there were all these explosions outside. I think fireworks, people were setting off fireworks, and they were happening at the same time that my divine bliss was happening. Mm-hmm. And that I even, working with the volcano, sometimes I feel in my body, in my heart area, and when I'm visualizing the volcano erupting, that's where the bliss kind of comes in. Mm-hmm. And like I described before, the shock waves that go throughout my body, mm-hmm. Are associated, that happens at the same time. So,
mm-hmm. Like when I was with you in the tuck, those kind of shock waves?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's that's kind of the experience.
Wonderful. So you now really have found your stride. This is the first time I really see in your face and feel in your vibration more integration, really, and also more competence and confidence that you don't need me to have access to these experiences. And that's what we hope for. That's right. True divinity wants to empower the divinity in all life. That's what makes a beautiful flower bloom, or makes a redwood nice and strong, is its own divinity being available to it. And what you had been taught, and what domination teaches, is that that's disloyal, or that you can only have access to someone or something outside you. That's artificial life. So now you're moving into the soul's way, which is you needed to be alone, and you knew you needed to be alone to go deeper into your I am presence, into your soul, which is with your twin. And so one thing that's really normal for everybody to understand is that when there's a divine energy that's coming through a human being, such as Isu or Eleanor, or a spiritual leader, a teacher who's holiness, we sometimes feel that energy, or even, I'm going to say also say a sacred river or a sacred place in nature. We sometimes associate that divinity with the individual in a way that the right way to understand it is that the individual is like a campfire for that heat source. But what is the heat source really, right? The campfire makes that heat because it's willing to burn all its embers with the vibration that is not it. It is not, who lit the match, and then you have a candle lit by that, and it's lit by a candle, and it's lit by a candle, all from that campfire. So the draw is to the heat source, and there's a mixed upness at times that the individual is simply a vessel or a fire, or and I think that's been part of your struggle, is to sort out, where do I end and your own divinity experience begin? And so there was that, and then there was some of the wounded dependency that comes from trauma. And you're starting to really untangle that for yourself. And I bet that feels safer for you.
It does, yeah. I was thinking this morning about some of the broadcasts where I first kind of started to come in on the YouTube channel, and just how much my attachment was there, and how that has shifted now, and how it does feel more safe and comfortable.
You mean in the garden?
No, I mean probably if I look back at those two, it's shifted, but I mean kind of several months ago.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, let's look at some Christian dysfunction, is that there was a mix-up that yes, the Son of God is one in the Father, and that's meant not necessarily to make a rock star or objectify or glorify too much the life of a person, right? If for example, a lot of young people these days, a lot of people are really healthy about their sense of empowerment versus dependency or distortion of where holiness is. And so a lot of the young people that I've tried to bond with have a really clean sense that they have their own divinity, and they know not to do what some of the more institutional senses of God have done, which is, yes, it's right to give glory to God, but not in a way that disempowers the other, disempowers you, and or at the same time objectifies God. I want to teach today on the 3 eyes. The 3 eyes for remember the teaching the other day about if the lamp is full of light, then if the eye is the lamp, and it only perceives light, and I taught I perceive, therefore I am is our new heaven and new earth way of being. And it's the heart that perceives and the heart that is. So one point to become aware of is that in the new heaven and new earth, we language divinity as the great heart. That I am, that is the hearth, that is the sacred, that is the mother and father as one. It's okay that we have different names for that according to our cultures and traditions, Allah and Yahweh and the Creator, Great Spirit, all kinds of names. But it's really the great heart. And the idea is that there's a great heart that those of us who are the Shambhala community are responsible to steward and to attend to as the builders for the new earth, working in a new way. And that those who are here in the new earth know how to have reverence and how to build their communities in relationship with the great heart, through the bread and the water, through the sacrament. So I know that's a big passion for Sharon and you, the sacrament.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I think what you just said is why. To have a way to have reverence and honor and connection to heaven, through this gift that Yeshua gave us. So, and I do just ever since I knew about it in a felt way, I've felt this strong pull to have care for the sacrament.
Right. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about before I teach more on the 3 eyes?
Well, there was sort of an issue that happened where a good friend of mine reached out, and I had actually been intending to reach out and just to be loving to her. And before I knew it was happening, I had kind of gone into an addiction. I'd been overtaken by addiction just through, reading a couple sentences in an email. And I really wanted to be able to be there for this person and, to talk. But I, luckily, because I spoke with you and we caught that I started to feel that addiction in my body, and I hadn't really noticed it at first. That it kind of just, how fragile it is. Even, I'm just at the very beginning of healing, and I'm in a fragile place with not being totally solid. So that wasn't, recognizing that wasn't something I could really go into because of the history there.
It's an old friend versus a new friend.
Right, it's a really old friend.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, we grew up together, so there's some, there's some history there.
Oh, okay. So you're trying to figure out how to have that sense of interpersonal well-being for you. Because if you feel it, then the other person probably is in a trauma state without knowing it.
Right.
So then you're trying to figure out kind of how to make your choices around these challenges of social bonds and also self-care and care for the other.
Yeah, so it's like right now it's seeming for me in the fragile state I'm describing, which, it's good, it's just, it is fragile. That going too deep with people I have long history with isn't probably in the best interest of either me or those people right now. So that just doesn't, because of the stage of healing I'm in, to find friendship elsewhere just at this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's see in my 3 eyes if I have anything to offer. Intersubjectivity, integration, insight. Well, so we can talk a little bit both about that and about what you said earlier about starting to notice a shift in how you perceived me and how you perceived your relationship or the availability of divinity to care for you and attachment to me with one of the 3 eyes that I want to introduce today. That is called intersubjectivity. So our 3 eyes, I tried to make a little chart for you. I want everybody to understand that in the new energy, there's no hierarchy. So I wasn't quite sure how to make this triangle that communicates there isn't one at the top. There isn't one that's the best. The 3 together make something new. And we want to be able to have all 3 available at all times in our sense of how we're meeting the world. And the 3 eyes are intersubjectivity, integration, and insight. intersubjectivity, I'll have a link we'll put up today. And so let's say we were all working together with our treatment manual. One of the big chapters would be on intersubjectivity, and I would resource quite a bit from the Stone Center. I'll put up an article from the Stone Center today on meaning of mutuality or empathy. So the opposite of intersubjectivity is narcissism. And narcissism actually is something that happens when we don't feel safe to be present to something or someone outside of what we know, which is us, ourself. So the only thing we feel we can love is our own mirror, our own reflection. Because the trauma was so great that we feel too threatened to perceive others as they are. So the healing is in practicing intersubjectivity, because there's a lot of narcissism in our culture from the trauma. Intersubjectivity is when I'm very aware that you are a whole individual with your own needs and your own identity, and I want to be attuned to you. As, how do you understand attunement, Andrew?
Not being like identified with, but sort of aware in a way that is, it's hard to describe for some reason, aware and in kind of a caring way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way to try and describe it. So can you think of an example? Let's pretend that there's a baby and it's crying. What would be attuned?
To the baby's crying, so if you're attuned to the baby, I guess there's an element of compassion that you feel, I need to care for the baby, so you pick it up and you soothe it.
Right. And if that doesn't work, what would you do?
Feed the baby. That's what they need, right? Food or
Mm-hmm.
care. Or
Yeah, you would just try different ways to see, why is this baby crying? And to be attuned to what it needs to help it not cry. Daniel Stern is someone we would also look at in our manual, our treatment manual. Intersubjectivity means mutual intersubjectivity, means that I'm attuned to who you are as a whole being, and I have empathy for who you are, and vice versa. So we're in a constant state of mutual perceiving, therefore we-aring, and attunement to the welfare of one another. So let's look at that when it comes to what you were saying about perceiving me one way versus another. And I've been teaching a lot this past week about how if we see me or treat me a certain way, we're going to get a certain result because of our interconnectedness. So intersubjectivity could also be, under that interbeing. And what was I just had another I that came to mind along those lines. Interconnectedness. So if you think about it, Andrew, one of the concerns when I saw you last night to pick up a copy of some media files at the end of the workday, and I stopped by briefly and I said, oh, did you put up my latest teaching on the whatever you do with the internet? And you said, I did. I said, did you name it? And then what did you say?
That I called it Understanding the One.
And what did I say?
You said that you didn't get it, that usually the titles make sense, but you didn't understand what that even meant.
Mm-hmm. And that I had a concern about it vibrationally.
That, that it had sort of the context of like the Matrix and the there being just like one person or.
Mm-hmm. So what I was aware of is that right? You have a great reverence. Like I have nothing but respect and confidence in who you are, and what you were describing yesterday is right on path. You're just going to naturally keep evolving like a flower keeps knowing how to open. So please don't hear this feedback as a criticism, but an example for a lot of humanity when it comes to how to be in relationship with divinity. Divinity is distorted by our own self-objectification through trauma. That's why intersubjectivity is so important, because it makes you real and me real versus one of us an object. And narcissism, everybody is an object to maybe see me or wow me if I'm a narcissist. So the big struggle that we've had with humanity is that your programming, which is the world program, was to have hateful feelings and thoughts and perceptions around me. And that's why we're going to get to the next I, which is insight, as one of the ways to overcome that in any programming, but particularly programming around building relationship with me during my time here to serve you. So if you can realize that intersubjectively what happened was that because all my broadcasts go through you, that meant that that vibration was how the camera was framing me and then how it was being streamed. Now we've had a beautiful, powerful shift, which is that you really, really know that I am here from heaven to be of service, from a wholesome and generous place. You have no more doubt around that. But because of trauma, again, and this is something that we might see in, say, governments and military, like, say, in the military, there's some conditioning to have loyalty that doesn't have insight, right? And so you don't question orders. So that's working with authority in a very unsafe way, because we want to have insight about why we're doing what we're doing and who is asking us and what we understand about who that who is. And I think that's been a lot of what you've tried to figure out these past 3.5 years. Who is this who? Is this who, someone to hate and stop and control? And then you got to a place really, particularly after the ceremony where we did the exoneration, where you really know. So now the next step, and it sounds like some healing's already happened since we spoke last night about this, is that if you don't have a sense of depth within yourself, a sense that you have your own ability to constantly practice insight, for example, the divinity's insights can be drawn upon through your own practice of meditation and prayer, contemplation and singing. Then what can become distorted is, like the Matrix, you could perceive me as the one, right? And that's really unsafe too, because it's a objectification that puts me, for example, on a pedestal. And that isn't healthy for you or for me. And I started to notice that over 2 or 3 days, is that you really got it, but then I, because I'm being perceived by you and held by you, and this is intersubjectivity, we're holding that sort of the one in more of that underdeveloped way, a little bit of a objectifying, and I don't mean objectifying mean, objectifying in a more glorifying way. I noticed that a little when I reviewed the teachings, that started to come through in my languaging, because we co-create. Intersubjectivity means what's going on in you and perception of me makes me who I am, and vice versa. So the more that I was able to, if I perceive, therefore I am, and it's my heart that perceives, and it perceives with love, then I make it safe for you to be you with dignity. Now, if we have a culture of shame and secrets around this trauma, we're going to perceive each other in ways that are very suspicious, me very suspicious, very antagonistic, very judgmental, very hostile. Are you seeing how powerful this is, the intersubjective perception?
Yeah, the way that we perceive it creates what it actually is there.
Well, can you see that even just the past few days with the one, and then a shift in how you understand things this morning from your healing time last night? Kind of compare and contrast for us.
Yeah, there was, after the shift with not having the doubt anymore, then there was sort of the glorification of, I had, some dreams around that, and that languaging the one was something I was kind of holding in a glorifying way without even necessarily really thinking about it, until you said to me you didn't understand about the title I used.
It was called Understanding the One.
Yeah. And after that, I realized, oh, that wasn't quite right to be holding that kind of, to holding you in that way. And so it feels like that's started to change.
Wonderful. What else?
I guess it feels, and now that you're explaining it more, it feels just better to hold that understanding.
Right. So the next piece I'd like to teach on is related to insight. What are your thoughts before I even get out of the gate on insight?
Insight, I guess, to me would just be an inner knowing, an understanding or a knowing that comes from within.
Mm-hmm. So you've had a lot of insights since I've met you, haven't you? Can you think of a few examples of ways you've been able to really proceed in your journey based on insight?
There's a lot of, dreams are one that those are coming directly from within. Mm-hmm. And I've had a lot of really powerful dreams that I knew were true knowing, not just, whatever weird stuff. And intuitive just feelings, whether it was just like an energetic feeling or a body feeling, memories, dissociated memories that were my own. Just to name it, those are the first few things that.
Right, those are all really strong ways to live insight. And of course, I'm seeing more, and you even said when I asked you how you were this morning, something about music. Insight there, how does that work?
Yeah, I guess with music, sometimes it's just, when I play it, it uplifts, and sometimes feelings or insight, I guess, comes across in a way that wouldn't have if I was just trying to say something.
Right. So insight is the gift of the I am, of your soul. And that is, again, a cornerstone for how we live in the new heaven and the new earth. Insight is something that heals domination and false authority, because you can reflect and question what's happening in a way that is constructive. That's why I often talk about the round table model, because we all respect each other, having something valuable based on our insights from our souls. And then the idea is that those who proceed in their journey into the great heart, which is the center of Shambhala, as an actual, I could say, place, state. Is a state a place? Yes, in the new heaven and new earth, a state and a place are the same. So if you can understand that the only way to proceed is to die again and again to external This is artificial life, external attachment, external identity, external history. That's how your I am becomes pure wisdom, and that's the safest for you and for others, because your wisdom is the same wisdom as the great heart. There's no difference anymore. But the only way for your wisdom to be the great heart's wisdom and not the noise and messages of pollution of the collective spheres and paranoias and distortions telling you that's who you are, which is all that you knew until very recently, right? That's, you were enslaved to a field, a vibrational field of suspicion, judgment, cruelty, hostility, violence, objectification. And all those messages were incoming, and a lot of them were thoughts. So they had no insight. Darkness has no insight, and that's why one couldn't proceed if they weren't able to enter the gates or proceed. It's because the soul isn't demonstrating the increased willingness to have the practices and the lifestyle to grow their insight. And I know that's been very important to you. And we forgot to name perhaps one of the most important ways now that you practice insight. You tell what that is and I'll get the door. All right, so we had a break because there was a knock on the door, so we could snack on a little papaya. Papaya and organic coffee from the grounds here, or maybe across the way. Anyway, coffee beans that are definitely, I do know, I can safely say, the beans are roasted on the grounds. And so what is your other big resource for insight these days?
I mean, there's...
Okay, I'll give you a hint. I had a dream with someone with 3 names who would be the absolute source of all my healing.
My twin.
Right. And so talk about insight in relationship to Shara Ann.
With connecting with her, there's an insight that is different than what I've known before. It's like sometimes when I'm swimming, it's like I'm swimming with her and through her and as her, and that feels like a new kind of insight.
Right.
So there's that, and then of course sometimes I hear message. She'll tell me things like she told me about why the water is sometimes cold and sometimes not in the swimming pool, and it's why.
Right. Wonderful. So, insight is the source of the soul's safety, because it means that authority won't be either objectifying of you or exploitive of your vulnerability, because you'll always have insight. And this is part of why in our manual and actually in the living of the new earth, Buddhism is so important, because Shambhala and Adyashanti, there's a lot of non-dual teachers that are teaching insight meditation and insight practice, because it's insight that is the opposite of programming and mind control and social control. And it might take a few generations to have our DNA and our cellular sense of how to relate to each other shift out of, the domination model versus the intersubjective model. Along those lines, there's a new piece of news I have for you about after your divine twin in you. And this could be years away, so I don't want people to get excited and jump ahead. One of the things that's happened is everybody's in so much pain and so dissociated that they often want to feel good without having done the steps to heal where the pain is by being able to be present to it. Which is why Thich Nhat Hanh's model, the order of interbeing, and the way of meditating, which is, breathing in, I know I'm breathing in, breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Those kinds of ways of practicing are so important because we need to be able to be present to what is here in a healthy way where it doesn't pull us off track with morbidity, and at the same time isn't swept under the carpet, so we're still in denial. And so I started to say that beyond the divine twin, once you and your divine twin are really one inside, right? There's as you said, it's not just messages, it's a state of being. And that's a journey that we're all exploring right now. And we may need more time or more changes in the Earth's movements and vibration. Then what happens is that you go to the next step, which is the divine complement. Do you know what that means?
I mean, I've heard that term used by others, but...
Oh, really? I've never heard it. This was just something I heard from inside. What is it out there?
I think it has sort of that connotation of like twin flame, sort of.
Oh, really?
With a person outside of myself.
Mm.
That person is my divine complement, essentially, you know.
And that's different than the divine twin?
I think it's used synonymously. I've heard it in that context before. But I'm excited to hear what it really means.
Well, so you're half of who you are down here at this point, because the human vibration was only able to sustain half of the whole. And what's meant to happen with that organic ascension versus the Mars one, or the Mars thing, and we'll talk about that in a moment, is that your vibration through embodiment, all the tools you're working with here in the garden, is meant to get to a place where you are one with your twin inside at the very least, so that when we ascend, something happens that, I don't know, it's a little bit of a mystery. I've talked about it as, are there two of you now? Does she come down as a separate person? Are you one in one body? My understanding from having explored this after trying to teach a little about being two is that you're one. You're really one in one body. That your divine twin and you are a whole being. And that might even look different as far as embodiment. Then there's a divine complement, which is the yin and the yang for you. So that would be someone that who also would have done this journey with their twin and is really integrated with them. And then they, each of you with divine twin as a divine complement, generate something that is sort of like, remember I taught yesterday about how mother and father as one make something new? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens with the twin, you and the twin. And then the complement is another version of that. It's endless, right? That's how you make a new galaxy, and constellations and all the rest is how we are in relationship with each other as nations, as face, as twins, as complements. We don't want to get too carried away with it, but we want to understand that the more vast our soul and the more aware we are in our I am presence, the more that is going to be substantive as a vibrational offering to the new heaven and the new earth. So, that's a little bit about that. The only other thing I would say along those lines is that that the complement is usually the opposite gender of who you are on earth at this time. That's what I know thus far. Now, I want to move on to integration, and I want to explore it right now with you. Are you aware that there's a lot of dissociation in the space this morning?
I guess I wasn't aware of that.
It's pretty bad, Andrew. Now, there's some healthy things too, right? I'm not saying it's all or nothing. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of terror right now this morning. Can you try and explore that for yourself? Maybe have a little papaya? I'll teach you a little while you explore this.